Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. And tonight is our Gameweek 5 National League preview. Tonight I'm joined by Joe from Off the Line blog to preview all the fixtures and discuss the latest news surrounding the National League. Joe, firstly, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Luke. Cheers for having me on again. Hopefully I can do a little bit better this time with my predictions. I shouldn't be able to do any worse. I think I was dreadful last time. So, hopefully I can do a bit better this time.
Yeah, I was quite delighted. I don't think if I remember rightly, I don't think I had a great week myself, but I think I got 4 or 5 points. It was something like that. And then you obviously had the 2 points. And to be honest, Joe, I've had you on a few times, and usually you're getting like close to 10, double digits, I should say, if not more. And for 2 points on the opening game week, not the best of starts.
Yeah, it just goes to show that predicting it right at the start is fool's business, really.
Yeah, like the Scunthorpe prediction as well. But no,
Yeah,
we'll talk about the good things. And of course, it's still very early on in the season. So I don't think that prediction you can laugh at too much yet, because a lot happens in a season. A lot of sides start well and tail off. And, you look at other sides who particularly start slowly, they grow into the season. So I think after 4 games, yeah, there's certain aspects that I think you can analyse and maybe say, yeah, I might have got that wrong. But I still think it's very early, and it's really hard to judge a table based on 4 games, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always going to be, there'll be teams that have perhaps started the season who will probably struggle come the end, and there'll be teams that haven't started that well that will probably be fine come the end. So, you don't learn a lot after 4 or 5 games. You need to be sort of near the 15, 20 mark, really, to get a full picture.
Yeah, I think one of the sides that have certainly started slowly and will be looking to improve quite quickly is Woking. A bit of a surprise for me under Neil Ardley. Had such a great second half to the season last year when he came in, and once the takeover was sorted, I think everyone felt that they were going to build on that momentum from the previous year, particularly with, the summer to bring in his own players as well. I think the transfer business in the summer surprised a few that because they did very little and there were no, I suppose, flashy names that they brought in like they were doing throughout last season. And of course, the start to the season itself has been very disappointing for Neil Ardley.
Yeah, I think I put a lot of value in Neil Ardley in my prediction. I didn't have them to go up or be in the playoffs or to struggle, but I had them sort of comfortably mid-table because he's a fairly capable manager at this level, Neil Ardley. So I put a lot of value in him, and I'm sure they'll be fine come the end. I have been a little bit surprised they've started so slowly. I'm not surprised by the fact that, I wasn't overly sold on the business that they did. In the summer, they made 1 or 2 good additions defensively. Obviously brought Chinwiki Okoli back to the club and made 1 or 2 others as well. But certainly offensively, that's where they look short so far. And obviously you've got the likes of Matt Ward, who was brilliant last year, who's not really done it so far. Harry Buteman as well, did well last year, not really got going. So, they are struggling. And I expect a couple more signings. And certainly they need probably that to get back to winning ways.
Is that what you put it down to? Do you think Neil Ardley himself has to take responsibility? Yes, we're only 4 games in, but it can be very cruel football at times. And even though you're only 4 games in, I think Woking are quite an ambitious club. And after 4 games, to have lost all 4, particularly considering some of the opposition that they've played as well, you'd have expected better.
Yeah, I think that would be the concerning thing is they've played teams who, with respect to those teams, you'd probably imagine will be near the foot of the table as opposed to the top. So the fact that they have struggled so far is a concern. And Ardley has to take some credit for that because obviously he's the manager and he picks the players. And, as much as I predicted them to be mid-table, that was a reflection of the squad and him. So they're both to blame so far. Obviously, I know they got 1 or 2 injuries. I think Will Jääskeläinen's not played a great deal so far, if I'm right. I think Craig Ross has been in goal. And they do look short, especially up top. Obviously, they lost Dale Gorman in midfield as well to an injury. He's been a massive miss for them. And yeah, they lack a little bit of impetus. It's all a bit flat. Perhaps maybe not having Gorman in there, a leader that can drive and set the standards, has made a big impact. But yeah, certainly well short so far.
I think particularly when you look at him defensively, which is such a surprise, particularly a Neil Ardley side that, usually under a Neil Ardley, the side is very good defensively, at least so far this season, alongside Aldershot, as you'd expect, have conceded the most goals in the division. The difference between them and Aldershot is Aldershot can put the ball back in the net to make up for those goals that they've conceded, whereas Woking, as you've mentioned, have only scored 2, yet conceded 10 as well. For me, I am quite concerned for them with this opening start, and I think Neil Ardley will be under pressure, albeit it's only 4 games. They sit rock bottom of the table so far.
Yeah, he will be under pressure. And I saw a tweet on Saturday that they feel that they've given Neil Ardley the tools to go and build a successful team. So he is obviously under pressure. And as you said, they are an ambitious team. They want to be pushing towards the top half of the table as opposed to where they are at the moment. I think it's a bit too early to be thinking about sacking managers, but yeah, certainly he's under pressure. But I suppose all those teams down the bottom are under pressure to some extent. So, he's an experienced manager. I'm sure he'll sort it out. But it's just probably going to take a couple of players and certainly 1 or 2 tweaks to do that.
Of course, it don't get any easier for Woking either tomorrow. They've got York City at home. Of course, didn't play themselves on Saturday either. How many games you've mentioned there that you think it's too early to consider sacking them, which I totally agree with, by the way. I think no manager should be sacked at this stage of the season. How many games do you feel Woking as a football club should be giving Neil Ardley?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose probably near the 10 mark. I know some fans get a bit restless and a bit demanding very quickly, but certainly I wouldn't be pushing the panic button anything before 10. If they still haven't won a game by 10 games, then yeah, I'd certainly be probably making a change. But yeah, I mean, 10 games I think is a good barometer of where they're at. They could, yes, they've not won so far, but wouldn't it just be National League that they go and beat York? So wouldn't surprise me. And yeah, they could win the next couple of games and suddenly they're looking far better. So yeah, I wouldn't be rushing into sacking him because who they're going to bring in else. They've got an experienced manager there.
Well, for me, I like Neil Ardley as a manager, and I thought when Woking appointed him, I thought that was a perfect appointment for them. I think he suits the club, particularly given a project there. And I have been awfully surprised with the start for Woking. I know I mentioned they've had quite relatively easy opposition. I think you consider that Carlisle game, that could potentially be one of the games that maybe you don't judge their season on, albeit you look at how Carlisle have started. Yes, they're still unbeaten, but we've seen the likes of Boreham, we've seen the likes of Solihull, who I think Woking will see themselves as a club that should be doing better than those two. They managed to pick a point up against Carlisle United. They've lost to Scunthorpe, Wealdstone and Hartlepool. And to be fair, they've all done very well, those sides, with that victory. But I still feel you look at those 3 games, if Woking want to be aiming for playoffs, which I think as a fan base is something they want, you'd have expected them to be able to have picked a result up by now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't want to suddenly upset Woking fans, but I don't think certainly looking at their squad as a whole, and perhaps the investment of other teams, I certainly wouldn't be setting the stall out to aim for the playoffs if I was Woking. I know Neil Ardley came out and said that they're going to aim as high as possible, which is great. Every manager says that. But I certainly wouldn't see them as a playoff team yet, for me. I think a comfortable mid-table team and build on last season. I think that's probably a more realistic aim. But certainly top 7. I think they're well short of that at the moment. And yeah, for me, that's why I'd potentially give him, sort of 10 games or so to try and sort it out, because they're not a top 7 team. If they were aiming for the title or top 3, then you'd say, well, yeah, we need to make a change. But you can quite easily, have a poor start in the first 10 or so games and still finish comfortably mid-table, which I think's their aim, or where they're likely to be. So.
Yeah, we've had a few people that have come into the live chat tonight already. We've had 2 nerds and 1 railways come in. Southend to win the league. Of course, they got another victory on Saturday away at Truro, a 1-0 victory there. Anthony, who's a Solihull fan, said Altrincham 5's won Solihull up the Moors. Yeah, of course, a 5-1 defeat to Aldershot. To be fair to Aldershot, they're the type of team for me that can probably lose to anyone on their day. And I mean, when they lose, they can lose quite heavily to anyone. But then on another day, they can be quite ruthless themselves. And if they have a good day and you have a bad day, you can get some freak results like the 5-1 that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of the way that Aldershot play is that, whilst they can probably lose to any team on their day, I'd argue they can actually go and beat any team on their day. They've got that about them. They're a good footballing team. They always score goals, even though they've perhaps not played, but certainly last season, without a recognised, number 9. They'll always score goals. It's just whether they can just keep them out of the other end. But I think whilst they had lost their first 3, obviously 3-3-2s, I think they're certainly, from looking in from an outside perspective, I think there were good signs in all of those games. The fact that they were so close, I mean, they should have got a point against Boston. They had a goal ruled out, which was a goal. So they should have got something from that. And they've been playing really well in those 3 games. It's just been set pieces for them and a couple of sloppy goals. So they're a good team, Aldershot, and I still maintain they'll be mid-table to top half, even with the start they've made, because I thought they've signed well, they've retained well, and they've got a manager that, whether he hasn't always done it in the National League, every season he's been at Aldershot, he's got success, be it edge of the playoffs or FA Trophy or FA Cup runs. So, yeah, they're a very capable team.
This is a question that I've asked Paul, I've asked Rob, I've asked other people as well who support Aldershot. What do you feel it is that's stopping them from going to the next stage in terms of getting into the playoffs, aiming for promotion? Because when I look at Aldershot as a football club, and I said this on the previous podcast, I see them as quite a big club in this division overall. But it just feels like every season it's always lower mid-table. What do you think it is that's stopping them? Because I like Tommy Widgington as a manager, and you've mentioned there they can actually beat anyone on their day, but inconsistency potentially. But what do you think it is that's stopping them from being consistent to be able to get into those playoffs?
I think in terms of being consistent, I think it's injuries. They got horrific luck with injuries. I mean, they're still playing really, really well. Obviously got that win on Saturday, and they still haven't got their best team out. They've still already got 6 or 7 injuries. You haven't seen Ollie Harfield yet, and 1 or 2 that picked up injuries at the back end of last season. So that doesn't help. Obviously, NL Musings, Ryan, that you had on, he actually did a stat that last season they had the most different lineups at the back defensively in the whole league. So if you're going to go and be consistent, you've got to have some sort of continuity. And when you're constantly chopping and changing players because of injuries or suspensions or whatever, that's not going to help. And I suppose for Aldershot, they're not a team. They're not a team like a York or a Forest Green that can just go out and spend. And I think sometimes you've got to be a bit realistic as to where you are as a club. Aldershot of the season they got on the edge of the playoffs, it was because they had 1 or 2 players, the likes of Tollage and Stokes, that had a fantastic season and exploded really. And if they're going to do that again, then they need to invest in some younger players and hope that they can have that really, really good season, because they can't just go out and throw a checkbook around and sign who they want. So, I mean, I completely agree. They're a big club. for the level. Always enjoy my trips to Aldershot, and they will be there or thereabouts on the edge of the playoffs for me, because I think they're a good side. I just think they lack that little bit of consistency.
I think something else that I want to kind of bring up into conversation, and it's something that's always, like, I've always felt that's how it must just be a coincidence, but the more I look into it, I genuinely don't think it is. And I've spoken to people about this, like the likes of Rob and what his thoughts are about this, and Paul himself. And how come it is that it's your Halifaxes, it's your Aldershots, it's your Gatesheads that have such significant injuries, and a large amount of injuries as well, when you compare them to a Rochdale, a York, a Southend, an Oldham of last year? If you look at all those sides, even Barnet, if you look at all those sides, I'm not saying that none of them do have injuries, because injuries do occur in football, but there's no way that they have the amount of injuries that a Halifax, a Gateshead, an Aldershot have had, an Altrincham even have had in the past. Firstly, before I give my thoughts on it, when I've actually gone and looked into this, why do you think that is? Do you think it genuinely is just a coincidence, or is there something behind it?
I don't think it's probably a coincidence. I think, take Aldershot as an example. I think the fact that they've gone with a lot of young lads who are perhaps a little bit overzealous at times, and got that real hunger. They've perhaps not got that. Whereas you look at the top teams, they've perhaps not got that intelligence of knowing when to go into a tackle, or when to, just read the play and shepherd players out rather than going in for that tackle. I think money ultimately is another factor. You look at all those top teams, they've got the money to put massive facilities and all the medical staff and all the things off the field to make sure that their players are right. Whereas you look at the likes of Halifax and Aldershot, etc., and Gateshead, who probably don't have all those resources and the top facilities to, make sure that they all recover properly and get the best doctors and the best, coaching in terms of medical. So, yeah, I mean, that is probably a factor as well. And that's why when you look at all the teams down the bottom of the league, it's always the ones that have probably less resources that they always end up picking up injuries. Because perhaps, I mean, the Aldershot are probably an outlier to that because they've got a fairly big squad. But certainly you look at Gateshead and Halifax have probably not got a very big squad. So lots of players are having to play a lot of minutes, and they perhaps can't get that rest. And, whereas Rochdale, who obviously got a massive squad, we've seen it this weekend with obviously all their changes. That's probably why they don't pick up injuries, because they've got the resources, they've got big squads, and they can make all them changes. Whereas a team like Halifax have probably, by and large, got to have probably the same 15 players or so all season, in which case you're going to pick up injuries.
I think as well, you've kind of hit the nail on the head there with what I were going to say as well. Sides like York, Rochdale, even this season, I'll say specifically, I know Rochdale last season had an awful amount of injuries themselves, so I want to be careful what I say, but York, Southend, probably your Carlisles this season. When I look at those clubs, I bet there'll be a lot bigger medical teams there. They'll have better sports science behind them, where they can actually find diagnoses for injuries a lot sooner compared to Halifax and Aldershot. And I think as well, the way, when you look at the type of people that are brought in as first aiders, what you'll have, and this could be potentially, I don't have inside knowledge into each club, but potentially it's younger people who are being brought in who are new onto the job, doing that kind of coming into the kind of sport physio type of world, learning more about it on the job, still quite young, compared to York, where they've probably got a lot of experienced high-end professionals, in the physio room that can actually assess injuries a lot sooner and diagnose injuries a lot sooner. And, they can actually put more money into treatments and et cetera and things like that, and be able to manage it more. And it's probably as well why I know none of those sides are part-time, but part-time sides have often been known to have a lot of injuries. And that's probably because, they don't have the same resources. They're having to travel constantly. They're not being watched, like your York's sides are 24, well, in training, for example. So, yeah, I think that's probably a good reason. I'm glad I've kind of looked into that now, because it's something that's always bugged me. When I see Halifax or Florent Hotty's injured, or we've got 5 centre-backs out, it frustrates me, because I'm like, well, why is it happening to us? It can't just be a coincidence. And I suppose we've kind of got to accept that it's not just bringing in players where bigger clubs are going to thrive in terms of the finances they've got. It's also in terms of, your medical staff, your training facilities, everything that really does reflect the football club overall, in my opinion. Also tonight we've had Paul, who's coming and said, good evening, Luke, from the Barnet boys. Yeah, they got a good win on Saturday at Cheltenham. And then we've had a Forest Green fan from Vancouver, Canada. Started watching the show at the start of the season. You do an excellent job. Thank you very much for the kind words. Let us know what time it is there that you're actually tuning in from. I do love it when you get the 1 or 2 international fans that do tune in. We've had Southend Hartlepool 0-0 up the Shrimpers. I think a lot of people will be going for a 0-0 draw based on how both sides have started the season defensively. And then we've also had John Johnson. Everyone tipped Carlisle to lose at the weekend. Humble pie all round. Then, to be fair, I wouldn't get ahead of yourself, to be fair. It's a good win, and to be fair, that they have proved you wrong, but I still do feel there's some undefined issues there, particularly defensively. I stand by my point that I think the strike force for me can compete with the other 3 or 4 sides that I think will be in a title race. Midfield, you need a defensive midfielder quickly. They need to bring someone in. And then defensively, I still don't think they're good enough, albeit they did get a clean sheet at Wealdstone.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on that, I know you said there that most people put them down to lose. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have expected Carlisle to lose at Wealdstone. But with the greatest respect to Wealdstone, obviously they started well, but I think 2 sides have probably differing ambitions, and Carlisle have started pretty well. So yeah, I mean, I expect it probably to be a close game, but I certainly expected Carlisle to go there and win that one. Because they've got, as you said, that firepower, that bit of experience, and a big squad. So with that bank holiday, they can probably make a couple of changes and freshen up the squad, whereas Wealdstone don't have that luxury. They've got to have pretty much the same team as that they've had so far.
Be a Monsters coming. He's a channel member. Truro have given both York and us a tough tactical battle. John Askey set them up well. Stop us playing. Don't think they will be whipping boys this season, but they need to find that something extra. I totally agree with you in terms of finding that something extra. They haven't actually been, battered as such yet, but it doesn't particularly matter how you're losing games. If you're still losing games, you need to convert them into wins quickly, because a gap is going to form. And for a side like Truro, they need to have a good start to the season, because it's only going to get tougher throughout the winter months, in my opinion. We've also had Lee, who's coming tonight, and said, good evening from the Essex Riviera. Will Southend concede a goal this season? Well, we'll have to see if the likes of Alex Reid and Jermaine Francis can potentially break down the Southend defence tomorrow. But to be fair, can the Southend attackers break down Hartlepool? We'll have to wait and see. And then we've had a Scunthorpe fan, I believe. It's either Scunthorpe or Braintree fan, up the mighty iron. Poor training facilities, Luke, can cause player injuries. Yep, I agree with you on that. I think medical staff and facilities are the biggest reason. Injury prevention is a complicated matter. Someone's put, where's Paul? He's working tonight, I believe, and that's why he's not been able to join me. But I'm delighted to be joined by Joe, because if the first week's got anything to go off by, it should be a comfortable win in the predictions league for me.
Yeah, well, Halifax aren't used to win so far this year, Luke. So got to get your win somehow.
Well, to be fair, we'll have to wait and see. Tomorrow. Speaking of Halifax, it is a topic I want to speak about tonight. At the Shea yesterday, there were banners displayed by the fans in the south stand behind the goal saying "Shape up or sell up," which was aimed at the Halifax Town owner, David Bosworth. It was the lowest crowd that Halifax have had for an opening league game since the 2012-2013 season, I believe, which was against Colwyn Bay, I believe that home fixture was. The crowd was actually only 1,200 yesterday. On the flip side, if you look at Halifax as a football club on the field, in the past 6 years, they've made the playoffs on 4 occasions with a bottom 6 budget. What's your thoughts on how the fans feel and the banners displayed to David Bosworth? Because I think it is torn between the fan base.
Yeah. I mean, I can only answer it from looking in from an outside perspective. Obviously, Halifax fans will rightly have a more justified point of view, obviously, given it's their club. But yeah, I mean, the question is, what do they expect, really? If you haven't got money, then you make the best of what you've got. And, for all the people that may criticise him, I think he does a good job. Bosworth, he's managed to, as you say, got in the playoffs a couple of times under Chris Millington with a really low budget. He's managed to bring in a good young manager in Adam Lakeland who will have probably the more than comfortable mid-table to playoffs this season. And he has gone out and been able to back his manager pretty well in the summer, not obviously to the extent of a Forest Green or a Carlisle. But, they've made a couple of really smart additions. And, I think that's something that you perhaps undervalue as fans sometimes. I think the way that football's going, you kind of just expect every team to just go out and spend. Whereas some teams haven't got the money to just go and spend. And some owners or some chairmen actually care more about the long-term future of a club than going out and just spend. If you live within your means, then, great. That's what you should do. You look at all the teams that get ever so close to folding and not existing anymore. In some cases, that's because they go and just spend freely and try to be something they're not. And I think Halifax are a very stable National League team. If the Halifax fans expect Halifax to go and be pushing for the title, then, on the one hand, I think it's probably a little bit unfair and unrealistic. And, that's not what they haven't got the budget to do that. But I think they do a fantastic job, Halifax, always overachieve. And, I don't think you can ask more than that, really, as a fan base. If what you put into the club and you often get more out relative to what you put in, I think he does a good job. It might not be title form or going and get real success, but I think he does a good job. So I suppose my question to you, Luke, is for those fans that do want him out, what do they expect?
Well, this is my point exactly. Don't get me wrong, there's things that I don't agree with that the owner does at Halifax Town. And I think every club, when you look at your owner, there's always things that you want your club to improve on the field and off the field overall. But something that David Bosworth has always stood by since he reformed the club, which we have to remember, he's the reason that we're actually in the National League now. Since we've reformed the club, he's always said that he wants the football club to be self-sufficient. And to be honest, I'm going to be brutally honest, we've got some very, very poor attendances at the moment that if you compare them to our positions in the last couple of years, we've overachieved. And being a self-sufficient football club, you need to be getting better attendances if you want to consistently be going for the playoffs and looking to get promoted. And I don't think as a football club at the moment, you can expect Halifax, if they want to be self-sufficient, to be able to kick on as a football club and actually get back into the Football League. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to the banners and David Bosworth, there's things that I personally feel he can improve on off the field. And this is what I think a lot of the fan base are wanting rather than the actual football field. Now, if you look at our attendances, they've been getting lower and lower and lower. Well, there's been quite a boom, I think, in National League attendances over the last couple of years since COVID. A lot of sides have had significant increases in attendances. Take Altrincham, for example. Altrincham were always struggling to get we're getting probably just over 1,000 prior to COVID. Now they're getting crowds of 3,000, 3,500 at times for the bigger games. Whereas Halifax, we're probably getting close to 2,000, over 2,000 before COVID. And now we're getting 1,200, 1,300 at home. What I think overall, I think off the field, there's things that they can improve on. And this is only something you can really comment on from the Halifax fan base, unless you've been in the home section, I suppose. The facilities at the Shea are not the best. And I don't think Bosworth actually should take full responsibility for that, because he doesn't own the ground, which means he can do limited things with the ground. But when you haven't got a burger bar, more than one burger bar that's effective, if you've got no match day experience, then families aren't going to be attracted to the football club. Take Scunthorpe, take Carlisle for an example. I know before kickoff they have live music on under the stadium in the concourse or just outside of the ground, which attracts a lot of people to come to the ground early. Whereas Halifax, you come in 2:45 or whatever, you get in the ground, see your team either win or lose, and then it's straight home afterwards. There's no actual match day experience. I think as well, you look at the actual football kits themselves. You can't get the new shirt at Halifax Town at the moment. Yeah, they only announced the new kit a day before the season kicked off, which meant that no one could get the new home shirt in time for the season to actually kick off, which I think annoyed a lot of Halifax Town supporters. Something that I know away fans will empathise with me and totally agree with me as well. It's only cash only on the gate. When you come to the Shea, you have to pay cash to get in. You can't pay card, which in 2025 seems quite ludicrous to me that they haven't solved this yet. Season tickets you have to pick up on the day of the game. There's a lot of things that I think the club can improve on, but I think in terms of on the field, I think they get it spot on considering the budget overall. Anything else to add finally?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just a bit old-fashioned. I think things like, can't pick a shirt up until the day before, or have to pick your season ticket up when you go to the game. I mean, if that's what we're moaning about, then Christ, we are picking hairs, really. Yeah, I mean, it's a catch-22, isn't it? Because if Halifax fans want more investment in the football club, go to the games. Where's the money going to come from? His back pocket?
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't got endless amounts of money. And I don't know the chap, but I'm sure he's not a oil tycoon with shed loads of money that you can just keep pumping into it. It is, I think as a stable chairman, I think he does a quite a good job. But you haven't got the attendances. You've got to just live within your means. He could quite easily go and spend and get you in loads of debt, and then your club folds further down the line. And I don't think Halifax fans will want that. Obviously, I get the fact that you, as a fan, you want a little bit more of an experience, and perhaps want you be able to pay by card, or good facilities in the ground, and turn up, say, rather than just straight before a game, you want to be there from midday and stay there after the game, etc. I get all of that, but if he hasn't got the money to do that, then I don't think you can really ask for too much more than what he's doing at the moment. That's obviously looking in from the outside. Obviously, as I say, Halifax fans are more entitled to their opinion than mine, because obviously they're fans of the club. But if he hasn't got that money, I think there's a lot of value in running a club sensibly within your means. I think people forget that sometimes, and I think he does a good job.
I agree. I was on a Scunthorpe podcast earlier today, previewing the game tomorrow, and we were speaking about the previous owners of Scunthorpe, not Declan, not Swan, of course, who nearly had the club going under, going into administration, etc. When they actually got that takeover under Hilton, I believe it was. I remember when they first got the takeover over, when they were going into the National League North, they were signing some ridiculous players that season. Fast forward to the January, everything just blew up, didn't it? I think it was looking like they were going to get kicked out of the ground. They were going to have to go and play at Gainsborough. There were talk of them actually potentially going into administration again, liquidation potentially as well. Fortunately, they got the takeover. It all sorted itself out. But that's a prime example of a manager who isn't, not a manager, I should say, an owner who isn't spending within his means.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think, yeah, you just got to be obviously a little bit careful what you wish for, I suppose. You know, I'm sure Bosenworth is not doing it because he doesn't want to. I'm sure if he had the means, financial means to do it, I'm sure he would improve everything. But as you say, obviously doesn't own the ground. I'm sure there's limitations there in terms of what he can do. Yeah, I'm sure if you gave every chairman or owner in the National League and said, "Here's an endless pot of money," I'm sure they would improve their clubs no end. But you know, some owners will go out and just spend. Some will do it within their means. And you know, ultimately, the teams that survive the course and are still there in 20, 30 years time are the ones that are stable and run properly. So, yeah, that's my view on that.
John's come and said, outside point of view, for me, it's off field with season ticket sales fiasco, shirt launch, and don't seem to promote locally and attract the crowds. That's something that I totally understand and I get. But when it comes to on the field, which I think is most important, being a self-sufficient football club, that has to be the primarily, thing that has to be protected and looked at. I think David Bosenworth gets it spot on, because I don't think over the last couple of years we've ever been in any danger of going out of existence under his leadership. And there's been a lot of clubs in the National League that have, when they've spent a lot of money. I think Woking, where a club spent a lot of money as well, season after the owner actually came out and said he couldn't fund the club anymore. And it was looking like they could potentially have folded as a football club too. We've also had My Beautiful Saints beat Rochdale, Brackley Town, with a great win against Rochdale. I have to say, I actually expected them to be able to get a point there. I said a 1-1 draw because I felt it'd be a very difficult place to go. I didn't expect Brackley to be able to win that game. I have heard it was a bit of a smash and a grab, but to be honest, when you're in Brackley's position as a football club looking to stay up in this division, that's a huge win for them, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I said in my preview for the season that if they are going to stay up, they need to win their games at home, or as many as they can do at home, because it is a hard place to go. And I think quite a lot of people underestimated Brackley. I think coming into the season, quite a lot of people either had them to go down. I think I had them to stay up in mine, and they've already shown that they can grind out a result or two. As much as people will make reference to the fact that Rochdale made sort of 11 changes and had a different team out, I bet you half of those 11 players that Rochdale played would get in the Brackley team or would get on the bench. So it's not exactly a bad team that Rochdale put out. It's just Brackley obviously managed to get the win. So, full credit to them. That's if they are going to stay up, they're going to need to get those scalps at home, and that's a big scalp for a team obviously who started the season pretty well.
100%. A great win for Brackley themselves, and at the moment they're looking like they can certainly compete in the National League this season. As for Rochdale, then, first defeat of the season, first time they've actually dropped points in the National League this season. 11 changes to their starting 11 from Wednesday's result. Quite surprising how many changes they did make. I think he's come out and tried to justify it, which I totally understand. He's told everyone he's thinking, which is the most important thing. His thinking is overall, for those who don't know, you've got 3 games in the space of 5 games. Rochdale last season had a significant amount of injuries, and I think he's been very overcautious. I think as well, you look at Rochdale this season, they've purposely looked to have quite a big squad for injuries and for situations like this. And as you mentioned, that starting 11 on paper should have beaten Brackley away from home, and you could potentially say they've let down Jim McNulty. However, I just don't understand making so many changes, no matter how many games you're playing in short space of time. For me, overall, when you've got maximum points.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that you expect them to beat Brackley. I think you'd expect them to go there and put a good performance in, because the players that they started are good players. Yeah, I suppose given it is so many games in such a short space of time, they're always going to make changes. And it comes down to what we said, earlier in the pod, Luke, that teams that have the smallest number of injuries are usually the teams with the biggest squads that can make changes. And I don't know who Rochdale have got on Monday, but they're we looking to balance that, because I'm sure that the main players, if you can call them that got dropped for this game, I'm sure they'll be back on Monday to play. So yeah, I think 11, maybe not as many as 11, but equally, there may have been one or two players that you'd have purposely wanted to keep for Monday that you didn't want out at all. So, yeah, I think you'd still expect them to put a good performance in regardless, because it's still a very good side.
Someone's actually mentioned just hopped in. Have you guys discussed Scunthorpe v Halifax? No, we're coming on to the predictions very shortly. We're going to actually look at the scores on the doors for the moment and see how both me and Paul got on last week. If I remember rightly, it wasn't the best of weeks for myself, if I can actually get it up here. I believe Paul did actually beat me by quite a bit this week. If I can find it here. I'll tell you what. Thought I'd uploaded it. Anyway, I'll tell you what. We'll play the video for those who want to know how you can get involved in the Predictions League and play along yourself. This is how you do it. So that is how you play along in the Predictions League. I am struggling to find the actual updated results. I do know the scores, though. I believe Paul scored 10 points last week, and I scored 4. So Joe, you'll be looking to add to Paul's tally this game week.
Yeah, we can't have 2 Wealdstone wins in a week. That'd be a one for the books. But yeah, hopefully I need to get more than 2. I mean, 2 last time was atrocious. So more than 2, that's my aim. I'll take 3 this week.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I don't want to jinx it. Well, I do actually, but for you. But I think you more than 2 is very realistic, and I will expect you to get that, to be honest. I think you wouldn't even have to analyse the predictions. I think you could just put 2 numbers together for each fixture, and you'll probably get more than 2.
Yeah,
we'll move on to the opening fixture that we're going to preview, and it is, of course, Aldershot Town. Of course, defeated Solihull Moors by 5-1 away from home, coming up against Morecambe, who opened their account in the National League with a win over Altrincham. I think you look at from Morecambe's perspective against Altrincham, certainly a great occasion for them. I think in terms of the actual 90 minutes, I do think they were quite fortunate over the balance of the game. It did feel like a little bit of a smash and a grab for me. I think Altrincham looked more likely to go on to win it. What were your thoughts on that game, firstly?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually watch the game, but I think I'm not wholly surprised the fact Morecambe won. Not because I think Morecambe at this moment of time are a better team than Altrincham, but given that it was their first game of the season and everything that they've been through, obviously big crowd at home. I would have probably backed. I know I think it's easy to say now, but I probably would have backed Morecambe to get something from that game just for the occasion, that bit of emotion and the fans behind the team, and sort of the curtain being lifted for them and being able to go out and play. So, great for them to get off to a win, unbeaten, one of the only two unbeaten in the league.
Yeah, I think there's only them and Scunthorpe now who can actually still get maximum points come the end of the season. But no, a great win for them. I think it didn't really matter how they won the game. I think it's just the fact that they've got the first win of the season since the takeover's been complete. And yeah, it must have been a great occasion for those supporters. It did kind of give me, and it's weird to say, particularly because I don't have any connection with Morecambe as a football club, but when that second goal in, if you actually watch it, it does kind of give you goosebumps.
Yeah, obviously it's great for Morecambe, everything that they've had to go through. And we've seen it with the likes of Southend and Oldham that have had their problems and obviously got new ownerships and gone on to do pretty well. So yeah, it was a nice moment for them to see. And even though Phil Parkinson would have been disappointed with his players, I think deep down he'd have been quite pleased for Morecambe, the fact that they were able to get their first win on the board, albeit at the expense of his team.
I was so close as well to getting 3 points in that game as well. I went for a 1-1 draw. I said Morecambe will score first, and then over the 90 minutes they'll tire, and that's when Altrincham will get back into the game. And it went exactly like that. But the main concern for me that Altrincham are going to go on to get a winner. And then, of course, I think they just probably got too carried away, had too many men forward, and then Morecambe just caught them on the break late on. But no, an excellent day for Morecambe Football Club. And I think the whole football community were happy to see them win, probably apart from the Altrincham fans themselves. But in terms of Aldershot then, does feel like throughout the season they deserved the victory that they got on Saturday because of the performances overall. I don't think the performances have warranted their position prior to that game. Bear probably the Eastleigh game, you might say. But you look at the Altrincham game and the Boston game, they were two good performances for me that on another day they could have got all 3 points from both, yet they were on the losing end. So it did feel like justice was served for them where they got that first victory. Of course, against Solihull Moors away from home.
Yeah, I mean, that win was coming, really. I think the first 3 games, yes, they lost them all, but I think there was some really good signs, certainly offensively. As I said earlier in the pod, they're always a team that score goals, they entertain, and just 1 or 2 tweaks defensively, which obviously it looks like they made against Solihull. Then obviously they're able to go and reap the rewards of their efforts going forward.
In terms of a prediction then, how do you see this game going overall?
I think it'll be a fairly close game. I think it'll be fairly end-to-end. And I think ultimately I would probably have to side with Aldershot. I think they're obviously a little bit further down the line in terms of their preparation for the season. And I think the Aldershot will be buoyed from that win, obviously, against Solihull, eager to get their first win of the season at the EBB. And I'm going to go 3-2 to Aldershot, a reverse of the first 2 games.
This is something I totally agree with when it comes to this prediction. Morecambe were running on adrenaline at the weekend. They'll lose tomorrow 3-0. And I'm actually going to go for a 3-0 prediction. No, 3-1 I'll go because it's Aldershot and they're always bound to concede, particularly at the moment. But no, I think when it comes to Morecambe in that opening game, it was a great occasion, don't get me wrong, and I don't think many people expected them to get a result when you consider the situation in terms of them having to gather a squad at such short notice. A lot of the players themselves, at this point of the season, the players that they recruited probably haven't been playing football for a long period of time. Fitness, I think, Ted, it's tall, particularly towards the end of that game versus Altrincham, although they got all 3 points. and you've got the play game on the Saturday, you're then going all the way to Aldershot on the Monday, who are high on spirits themselves in Aldershot, particularly after putting 5 past Solihull Moors. I just feel for this game, in terms of that fitness, probably, in terms of quality in certain aspects as well going forward, you may say, Aldershot can be ruthless, like I mentioned earlier on in the podcast. And I just feel for this game, particularly now Aldershot have got that win, they'll be able to build on this against the Morecambe side that are probably still adjusting to the division as well. So I'm actually going to go for a 3-1 Aldershot win overall. Let us know your predictions in the live chat as well, and we'll put them on the screen as we go through. Moving on to the next fixture, Altrincham versus Solihull Moors. Both sides had disappointing games at the weekend. Solihull being, battered on home soil by Aldershot, and of course Altrincham. It's quite good timing this, this prediction considering the previous game we've previewed. Morecambe, Altrincham of course lost to Morecambe. I think for me, when I look at this one, I think Altrincham will be coming into this game with more confidence because I do think they probably deserve to beat Morecambe over the course of the 90 minutes, where Solihull Moors on home soil as well, so have conceded 5 goals. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, I think I watched the highlights back of the Solihull Moors game against Aldershot, and the body language of the players, that was a big takeaway from that. I thought they looked really, really poor, and sort of play certainly for, I think, the Jed Mearhole's goal. One of the Aldershot players makes a lovely run in behind, and there's 2 or 3 players that are just jogging from Solihull, just not getting back. I think obviously at 4-1, it's the game's gone, but I think the body language tells you a lot there, and the confidence is really low. So for me, I'm going to go with Altrincham. I think they'll win this one, get back to winning ways. I'm going to go 3-1.
I've actually gone for a 2-1 Altrincham win. I think Altrincham as a side against Morecambe, like I've mentioned, I thought they looked pretty good. The issue with me with Altrincham this season is scoring goals. I think they create a lot of chances, but in the final third in the fixtures so far, for me, it does feel like they're lacking something. I like the look of Jimmy Knowles as a player. I think he's great, but a lot of his efforts are outside from the boxes. I don't think he's an out-and-out goal scorer himself. You've got Redding on the wing as well, who is a frightening player. But once again, I don't think he's the type of player that's going to get you 10, 15, 20 goals a season. And do I think there's enough players around that team to be able to make up for the losses of Linney and Newby? For me, no, I don't think overall. And that's why I do feel that they probably won't be competing for the playoffs this season. I think defensively, I think they're okay. And I think midfield, certainly they're fine with Crawford and Marriott. In terms of this game, though, you've mentioned there about jogging back and things like that. And for me, that's just a mentality issue in terms of Solihull Moors. I don't think that's particularly about ability. That's just laziness and potentially not playing for the manager. Of course, I think everyone's had the concerns about Solihull in the summer, particularly since Matt Taylor came into the side last season. He didn't have a good record there. And I think a lot of people were surprised that he wasn't let go in the summer. Yet he's had, a full summer to bring in his own players. Yes, it's still early on. We mentioned 10 games. I think he's a manager that's probably under the most pressure before ball was kicked. And it's not been the perfect start for Solihull Moors. And I don't think it's going to get any easier here against Altrincham. I'm going to actually agree with you and go for a 3-1 Altrincham win. Just finally, before we move on to this fixture, in terms of Taylor, I don't want to be constantly be negative about managers, but I think him as a manager overall, he's someone that is under a lot of pressure, and I think he owes that Solihull board to be able to produce results this season based on the loyalty they showed to him last season, and he's not produced them in the opening couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think they've shown him perhaps more loyalty than his results have warranted. And it's for him to try and repay that. I think obviously as an outsider, we don't see what he does on the training field, but so that we can only really judge it on the pitch. and on the pitch, I think they are poor. And they managed to get a couple of good results last season at the end to make sure that they were safe, albeit they had Jerry Gill there, who came in and made a good impact. Obviously, haven't got him this season, and obviously there's lots of change behind the scenes, with Steve Ward going as well. I think you just get a sense sometimes of a manager, Luke. Whether they're gonna have that grit about them like a Dean Brennan or a Tommy Widgington that's, real fighter, real winner. And I just don't get that with Taylor. He seems very calm, perhaps too calm at times. And ultimately, the fact that he's a little bit of a calm manager, that's reflected in his team. They don't play with that bite, that real aggression to go and win the ball and play good football. So, yeah, I think he's got a tough job there, and he needs a couple of results to get the fans back on side, I think.
Yeah, a lot of people are going through Altrincham wins here. We have actually had someone gone for a Solihull win themselves as well. Peter's asked if we did the Southend prediction. No, we're coming on to that game shortly. Of course, they've got Hartlepool. Moving on to the next fixture, Boreham Wood versus Truro. Two newly promoted sides from the National League South. Boreham Wood got off to a reasonably good start. As for Truro, I think a lot of people didn't really know what to expect from them this season. Whether they're going to follow the pattern of a team like your Weymouths or your Oxford Cities, or if they were going to potentially be the type of side like a Tamworth that could potentially be an unknown quantity and surprise a few. Based on the opening couple of games, based on the actual results rather than the performances, it feels like they could potentially be in the next Oxford City. But if you look at the actual performances, I think they can compete in this division. I just don't think the results have really gone for them so far.
I perhaps wouldn't put them in terms of competing in terms of that top area. But I did back them to stay up. Granted, obviously, they have struggled so far. The lack of goals is a real concern. Obviously, they've not had Tyler Harvey in quite a few of those. He was obviously a really big player for them last year. And whereas, say, Tamworth came up, a little bit of an unknown. I think anybody that watched the National League South last year knows exactly how Truro are going to play. They're going to get it into Tyler Harvey fairly direct, fairly quickly. And yeah, I think this is one game that John Askey will look at and feel that he can try and get something from to get going. On paper, one of the easier games. But I'm going to go with a Boreham Wood win. I'm going to go 2-1. I think they've got that little bit more National League experience in their team. And on a really, really good pitch, one of the best pitches in the league, I think Boreham would have just got that little bit more pace about them to knock it around Truro and get the win. But 2-1, and I'm going to also go for. Don't get bonus points to this, Luke. But
I will actually give you one if you let me on another game. Predict the score if that's. I'll do that if you want.
Yeah, well, I'll go 2-1 at Boreham Wood, and I think Don Johnson Fisher will score for Truro. I think he's been really bright so far. Really liked him. I think he's been the standout so far for me from a Truro aspect. So on a good pitch, I think he's going to score, but ultimately 2-1 win for Boreham Wood.
Can't remember if it was the York or the Wealdstone game, but I was watching the highlights, or it might have been the full match, and I remember Fisher, who you've mentioned, that he stood out to me because I think everyone with Truro feels that Hart is going to have to be the prolific goal scorer that's going to keep them up in this division. But I do feel him as an individual, Fisher himself, looks very promising as well, very skillful as well as an attacker too. So yeah, I'm quite impressed with him overall. But in terms of this actual match, from my perspective, I think Boreham Wood so far this season, I think going forward they're a lot better than what I thought they would be. I think you look at Sousa, he's a player that I've admired for a number of years now. A lot of the time he gets a lot of criticism for his end product. For me, in the opening few games, I think, he's had that final pass to him. He's had that goal in him as well. I think he's a really good winger for me at Boreham Wood. And they've also got a goal scorer, which a lot of people felt they'd be struggling for this season, particularly when I think they lost Appiah in the summer. But Will Norris himself, he's got off his mark this season and scored a couple of goals so far. But I think if you look at Truro performance-wise, particularly that Southend, that York game, they were a little unfortunate, I thought, in both games not to have got a result out of that. And I think they're due a result. We're going into the 5th game of the season. I think they competed in both of those games. Yes, potentially in both boxes, they're not good enough. They wasn't good enough. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. But I think against Boreham Wood, this has to be a game that they're looking at, thinking that they can potentially pick something up from. They're aware of what Boreham Wood are like as a footballing side from last season as well. They beat them to the title as well. We've got to remember that. And albeit Boreham Wood's a difficult place to go, I think Truro will be able to get a result out of this game, and it'll be the first result in the National League. And I'm actually going to go for a 1-1 draw overall. Still concerned about them staying up this season. I did have them to stay up, but I am a little bit more concerned based on the opening couple of games. But we've got to remember who their manager is. It's John Askey, and he knows this division like the back of his hand. And like I've said, in the actual performances themselves, probably apart from the Wealdstone game, I think in all those fixtures, they look like a National League side for me overall. And, hopefully for their sake, they can start picking results up. And this has to be the type of game that they're looking at as one of those. Moving on to the next fixture, Boston United versus Wealdstone. Wealdstone dropped points for the first time this season. An excellent start overall for them. And there's no shame in losing to Carlisle on home soil, particularly as they were able to compete with them for the full 90 minutes too. They're coming up against a Boston side themselves who have probably not had the best start to the season themselves. However, they've been able to pick up that victory against Aldershot in their first fixture. But of course, since then, 2 defeats on the bounce for them.
Yeah, I know Boston are struggling at the moment. Got quite a few injuries, and obviously haven't got the biggest of squads. Been quite impressed by Wealdstone, have to say. I think that they've surprised me. I think they've done quite well in terms of the signings that they've brought in. I think they've hit the ground running fairly well, and obviously very unlucky in the game against Carlisle not to get something from it, given that it was so close. I am actually going to go for a Boston win. Obviously, apologies, Paul, but I'm going to go for a Boston win. I'm going to go 1-0. I think Wealdstone will go there and battle really well. But one thing that I was actually told by a Wealdstone fan who will remain nameless was that they lack goals and they lack firepower and they lack that quality up front. I think it'll be a really close game, but I'm going to go 1-0 Boston.
I think when I saw them against Halifax, I thought, that might be based on that Carlisle game, because I know they competed for the full 90 minutes and they weren't able to score, and that was the only thing they didn't do. But Adwaka going forward, he scored a great goal against us and looked like a good striker. And I think there's a lot of expectation for him to be the type of player that's going to come on this season. But I don't think Wealdstone as a side overall can afford to be relying on one player to be able to get them 15, 20 goals like they did last season. Because let's be honest, you take Alex Reid out of that side last season, they would have been screwed and they would have got relegated. And I think, to be fair to Cox himself as the manager, I think he's been aware of that, and I think the Wealdstone board have. And the way they've recruited is to be better as a side overall and to be able to score more more goals overall, I should say. You've got likes of Kretschmar, you've got likes of Hutchinson. I think Bolswine has had a better start to the season than what he had last year himself, and he's a player who's capable going forward as well. The new signings that they've made going forward, we've seen Omar Musa himself. I think he looks great for them. Nathan Tushunka, he's a player who got into double digits last year. We can't forget that at Tamworth. Was probably seen as their star man last season before he got that move to Eastleigh that didn't work out. So for me, overall, I look at Wealdstone, and I think they've got quite a lot of goals in their side. And I think they're coming up against the Boston side here themselves, who had a good opening game. I think going forward, they're quite good with Lennon John Lewis. You know what to expect from them now with the way they play. I can see this game being a draw, and I'm actually going to go for a 1-1 draw for this fixture overall. This is what everyone else has been saying. We had 1-0 Wealdstone, 1-1, 2-1 Boston, I should say, 1-1, 2-2. We've also had Paul, of course, a Southend fan from Bratislava. Evening from Bratislava, I survived the Boston versus Halifax game up the Shrimpers. Yeah, he came over, and I think he was in Lincolnshire, so he went to see Boston versus Halifax. It was a shame I couldn't go to that game. But yeah, he were there to see Halifax's only win this season, so you need to come back, please. Anyway, the next fixture, Carlisle versus Braintree. Braintree aside, another side I think a lot of people wrote off at the start of the season, including myself. I still think it'll be a long season for them, but to be fair to them, in the opening couple of fixtures, they've got 2 wins on the board. They're coming up against the Carlisle United side, who remain unbeaten, and of course got a victory away at Wealdstone on Saturday.
Yeah, they haven't been great so far, Carlisle. Obviously scraped past Wealdstone and laboured to that draw against Solihull Moors. I think Braintree have done what I probably expected them to do, not been overly great going forward. I thought they defend pretty well, set up really well. Obviously, Mason Terry that's come in, the goalkeeper, not conceded a goal at home yet. I think it will be a real good test for Braintree. But I'm going to go for a Carlisle win. I think they'll be wanting to lay down a bit of a marker, especially against a team who you'd imagine they should beat. And I'm going to go 3-1 to Carlisle.
I think this is the type of game where there's additional pressure on Carlisle's players overall because of the opposition. Now, this is no disrespect to Braintree whatsoever. They're both in the same division for a reason. But when they came down into this division, when you're playing the likes of your Braintrees, your Wealdstones, your Tamworths, these traditional non-league teams, your first thinking is, we should be battering these today. And that means that there's additional pressure on the players. I think if Carlisle win this game, I don't think there'll be applaudits to them from the fan base, particularly overall. There'll be no brilliant performance. It'll be like, yeah, job done. That was you. We expect you to win that game. So even a win, to be honest, to a certain section of a fan base, probably won't be acceptable for this game. It has to be a good performance as well overall. And they've got to take the game to Braintree, which I expect. Now, you look at Braintree, they're not a side yourselves who you can underestimate based on their start to the season. They put Halifax to the sword on the opening day. They've just beaten Yeovil. Defensively, it does feel like overall they look quite solid. And they've got a really experienced striker that Carlisle will be aware of from his time at Colchester in Akinde going forward, alongside Walker as well, who is as well himself able to score goals too. I think he got in double digits last season for Woking, and that were quite a good signing for Braintree. I just feel for Carlisle, they've got that win at Wealdstone now. You look at that strike force, they should be able to put a few past Braintree. So I'm actually going to go for, I'm probably going to go for a 2-1 Carlisle win. I was going to go 3-1, but you've gone for that. So I'll change my prediction up a little bit. Anything else to finally add on this game before we move on?
No, other than I think it'd be a really good barometer for where Braintree are at. Obviously got that good win against Yeovil, and been unlucky in some of their other games to only lose by your goal. But obviously this is going to be probably their biggest crowd against them of the season, and a really, really good test for them.
We've also had John. If you're a Carlisle fan, this is the same every year. Don't think the National League have really thought about the fixtures. I think as fans we love it because there's so much football at this time of the season. But for the players, it doesn't feel particularly fair. You've got teams playing on Wednesdays, Saturdays, then Mondays. It must have an effect on players overall. Carl's on game, and if I said got to disagree there. barely any easy games in the National League. Braintree beat Halifax. If that's a Carlisle fan, or if you're meaning what I've said there, I'm not saying that at all. What I've basically put a point across is I think there'll be a lot of Carlisle United fans, like any club that comes down into this division, when you play your Braintrees, your Tamworths, there's a massive expectation there that you take that team to the sword because of the difference in club stature overall to what I'm saying, in my opinion. Hopefully I've explained that enough. Anyway, moving on to the next fixture we will have a look at. It will be Forest Green versus Eastleigh. Probably not a good time for Eastleigh to be coming up against Forest Green. They've finally got a bit of momentum, 2 wins on the bounce for them. And now they're coming up against the Forest Green side that look like the team to beat at the moment in the National League. Of course, they went away to Halifax and got all 3 points there. And let me put it this way, Halifax played out of their skin, I thought, in that game and certainly competed with them for long parts of the game. What's your take on this game?
Yeah, I've been really impressed by Forest Green, Luke. So far, been really, really impressed. I think I didn't expect, and hold my hands up a little bit. I didn't expect Robbie Savage to come in and make the impact that he has so quickly. I think the football's been bright. I think there's just his energy is infectious. There's a real positivity there, I think they are the team to beat at the moment. Obviously playing really well, albeit, funny enough, since there's the rumours that obviously the manager might have gone, that EC have then gone and won 2 games. So, I would lean towards Forest Green. I think if it was last year, I'd have said probably a draw. Forest Green this year have added so much more pace and energy to their side. So I'm going to go for a 3-0.
Oof. Particularly after where Eastleigh have been in the last 2 games. I don't want to analyse this too much because I don't think you probably think as much about it when you're in that way. But do you think that's a 3-0 in terms of Forest Green absolutely thumping Eastleigh? Or do you think it's one of them where it's closer than it looks, if I'm explaining that right?
Yeah. I think it'll be a closer game than 3-0 in terms of dominance. I just think Forest Green knocked the ball around so well. And in fairness, they've had, they put 4 past Sutton. And I'd certainly say that Sutton on par with Eastleigh in terms of quality, albeit not so at the moment. Obviously, Sutton has struggled, but Forest Green look good. They're confident at home. They've been really good. I think Forest Green have just got that little bit about them at the moment to, it might be the sort of game whereby it perhaps takes a while for them to get that first goal. And once they've got that, then they can add a couple of late goals to add the gloss to the win. Because I just think they've been playing that well that obviously they can get the win.
I did like the look of Forest Green at Halifax. I have to admit, I think they're a completely different proposition to the Forest Green of last year. I don't think they could have carried on the way they did last year. And to be fair, at the time they let Steve Cottrell go, I think it's actually turned out to be quite a good decision because I don't think, like I've mentioned, under Steve Cottrell with that squad from last year, I don't think they'd have been able to compete for the top 3 this season and potentially not even the playoffs, particularly when you look at the way that Forest Green finished the season. Now, Savage is coming, I should say, to the role at Forest Green Rovers. And to be fair, it was quite a mixed one, I think, within a lot of people. A lot of people have completely different opinions on him being appointed. And let me say something, with his interviews that he's done, with his recruitment, everything from top to bottom, so far in the opening 5 games, it's proved to be a great decision. And I genuinely think him as a manager, I think he's a quality manager from what I've seen of him at Forest Green Rovers. I like the look at him at Macclesfield. I think they did a series on him on is it BBC iPlayer when he was at Macclesfield, and there were things there that I thought, he looks like a good manager and obviously knows what he's doing. He's obviously quite a big face. And I thought when he made that decision to go to Forest Green Rovers, there was always going to be question marks, wasn't there? Why he's coming up 2 divisions now. But I just think Forest Green, it's the perfect club for him. They operate in a similar way to Macclesfield. I think he knows the club from when his son played for them on loan. I just think when you actually think about it in more detail, it makes the perfect fit. And I think overall, so far, it's certainly paid off for them. And some of the football they were playing at Halifax was way above National League level, in my opinion. And you just look at the strength in depth that they've got this year compared to last year. The likes of Cardwell, Cairo Mitchell, and Ryan Innes on the bench just doesn't feel fair, to be honest, when you compare that to the likes of Halifax's bench. But no, in terms of this fixture, like I've said, I don't think it's the type of game Eastleigh really want when they're starting to build a bit of momentum to be going away to Forest Green Rovers. And I think they are probably going to struggle. So I'm actually going to go for a 3-1 Forest Green Rovers win. Moving on to the next fixture now that we will have a look at. It will be Rochdale versus Sutton. Sutton, a lot of people had quite high expectations for this season, not had the best of starts. As for Rochdale, maximum points until Saturday, where they lost 2-1 to Brackley. Does feel like they're likely to revert to the starting 11 from that Wednesday night win over Gateshead for Rochdale though, at home. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I've been really disappointed with Sutton, Luke. They're the one team that I put to be in and around that playoffs in my predictions. And I've been really disappointed. Defensively, they're conceding a lot of goals. Already have 1 or 2 sending offs as well. And it looks like a little bit of a naive squad at the moment. Lots of young players, lots of players that are stepping up to the level, perhaps for the first time. And I've been really disappointed with them. For Rochdale, I have been impressed. Obviously, started the season pretty well, apart from obviously that game at Brackley. Albeit, I think in isolation, it was lots of changes. I think Rochdale will win this game, Luke. I think it probably won't be as comfortable as some of their other games, given that they have changed it likely lots again. But I just haven't got enough confidence in Sutton at the moment for them to go and get a result. So I'm going to go 2-0 to Rochdale.
Snap, we've both agreed on that 2-0 to Rochdale for similar reasons to you. I think they'll probably revert back to a lot of the players from Wednesday night. I think Alarakia may stay in the starting 11, to be fair, and maybe 1 or 2 McBride as well. But no, for me overall, I just think Rochdale will probably have a little bit too much for Sutton, and they're low on confidence at the moment. And it's quite surprising because I think they were a lot of people's dark horse at the start of the season. Moving on to the next fixture that we'll have a look at. It will be my team coming up against Scunthorpe United. Similar story for Halifax to Eastleigh, I think. Got a win against Boston. Good performance versus Forest Green Rovers, albeit they did lose. They're now coming up against a Scunthorpe United side that are so high on confidence at the moment. They probably feel that they can beat anybody in this division. Of course, maximum points for them in their opening 3 fixtures. Didn't actually play on Saturday too, which could be an advantage to them. The only disappointing news for Scunthorpe is that it's likely, and I've heard this online, that Danny Whitehall might be out injured for this fixture. And of course, he scored a couple of goals for them so far this season. I know you actually said, Joe, and I actually agreed with you at the time about Callum Roberts, and it being the case, if you stop Callum Roberts, you will stop Scunthorpe United. More or less every goal that I've seen Scunthorpe score this season has involved him at some point. In the highlights reel, he literally dominates the game. He's such a good individual, and I think if it wasn't for injuries holding him back, he would easily be a League 2, if not a League 1 footballer at the moment. And for Scunthorpe United, he's certainly the poster boy there. I still stand by the point. Like you said, if you stop Cal Roberts, you will stop Scunthorpe United. The issue is no one seems to be able to stop him at the moment.
No, and that is a problem. But he hasn't been the one scoring the goals. They've had a couple of players, as you mentioned, the likes of Danny Whitehall, that have been scoring. We say about if try and stop Callum Roberts. People can't stop Declan Howe at the moment either.
Yep.
Obviously scored a couple, stepped up pretty well. And apologies, Luke, but I'm going to go with a Scunthorpe win. I'm going to go 2-1. I think, if you're taking it on face value on what you've seen at the moment, I think Scunthorpe has started the better of the two teams. Obviously, at home, there's fairly free scoring. And even if they don't have Danny Whitehall, I'd put my money on Declan Howe getting a goal in this game. I think it'll be really, really close, but I'm going to go with Scunthorpe to win 2-1.
Potentially, this is biased from me because I'm a Halifax Town fan, and I've actually seen performances for full 90 minutes in this division. Unless they're on DAZN, you can't. And if you're at a football game, you can't watch a full 90 minutes of another game back. So I can't watch the Scunthorpe game back that they play against Sutton. I can only take them off the highlights, and I haven't been able to see Scunthorpe in action for a full 90 minutes yet this season. But it does feel like you've got Carl Roberts, you've got Whitehall and Declan Howe as well, and they're the three main threats going forward. And it's actually good that they've got a range of different players who can score goals for them, because I think a lot of us felt they're going to have to rely quite heavily on Carl Roberts this season. Of course, you've mentioned he hasn't scored yet, but the amount of assists he's got has been pivotal, I think, to more or less every move for Scunthorpe going forward this season. And if Danny Whitehall's out injured, I just feel, he's a major source for them. The thing for Halifax is Sean Hobson went off injured. We're not sure if he's going to be able to play or not. We've had a large amount of injuries, particularly defensively at the moment, which probably doesn't help. But I feel in a Halifax side, they're always quite good defensively. And I feel this season, and you can only take my word from it, being a Halifax fan and seeing them for 90 minutes, there's a few players for Halifax that are hidden gems going forward. I think you have to look at David Cower. You'll be aware of him, Joe, because of his time at Yeovil. He's a striker for me that's got a lot of potential. And then you've also got Turner Cook, who scored a free kick on Saturday, and he stood out for me on that pitch. It was certainly the best player for Halifax on that day. He's going to be back in the start in 11. And I'll be honest, I thought we went toe-to-toe with Forest Green Rovers, and it could have gone either way. And I think the difference probably was that they had a lot stronger bench than us. This isn't the case with Scunthorpe. Scunthorpe have got a great starting 11, but as well, their bench is probably similar to Halifax's bench. And I think when you put both starting 11s together, I genuinely feel at the moment Halifax will be able to compete with Scunthorpe United. And Scunthorpe have won their opening 3 games, but they're due to drop points at some point. And maybe I'm being biased. I don't think overall, when you look at me, you look at my predictions on Halifax, I've been biased. So you've got to let me off with this one. I'm actually going to go for a 2-1 Halifax Town win. Anything to add on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got to back your team. I actually think Halifax are a better team away from home than they are at home. Obviously, we're under Chris Millington. And even though they obviously have made changes to the pitch at Halifax, I think, they are a team that's geared up to be better away from home than they are at the Shea. But, I mean, the question obviously you mentioned David Cower there, Luke. Do you think he's the striker capable of leading the line as that number 9? Or do you think he's perhaps, because the way I see him potentially is being sort of a second striker, playing off of a bigger striker? Do you think he could play that role?
Well, it's interesting you say that because why is the name gone out of my head? Will Harris, of course, who was signed in the summer, I think is that traditional big, striker, that number 9. And you've got Cower. When he's back, it does feel like potentially in the future those two will work together going forward, albeit because we have played 2 up front at times this season. So for me, I think in a 2 he'll probably do a lot better playing off the striker because he's got a lot of pace to him. And he's someone that I think Halifax, I can't remember a time that Halifax have had an out-and-out goal scorer like him. I think the last one you'd probably say is Billy Waters, but he's a very different type of player to Billy Waters. He can carry the ball forward himself. If you look at his assist at Boston, it was certainly like that. And he's got a finish on him too, if you look at Wealdstone. Another player as well to mention, Cody Johnson. He's a brilliant midfielder. And I think overall, when I look at the performances, I don't think our placement in the league is a fair assessment of how we started the season overall. I think we had one bad performance against Braintree. Wealdstone down to 10 men, thought we competed. The other two games, Forest Green competed. Boston deserved to win. And I think at some point, we're going to get, we're going to be, we're due a result. And I think here away at Scunthorpe have got maximum points. I still feel that we're capable of being able to compete with them, and that's why I've gone for a Halifax win. We're having there's people in the live chat commenting on what they'd rather have at the football. What would you rather have? Mash with what would you rather have with a pie, Joe? With chips or mash?
In a restaurant, probably mash. In a football game, probably chips.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying on that, because at a football, it's a lot easier to eat, isn't it? When you've got mash at the football, blooming heck, it's a nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah, we can't all sit in the prawn seats up in the hospitality. Yeah.
We'll move on to the next fixture, Southend versus Hartlepool. Potentially a game of the game week in terms of it being second versus third, albeit we're only 4 games into the season. However, I don't think it'll be a very entertaining one based on how both sides have started the season in terms of the lack of goals they've conceded. Neither side has conceded a goal in the National League yet this season. Do you feel, Joe, this is the fixture where at least one of them concedes a goal?
Yeah, I do. I think it could quite easily be a 0-0 as well, given how good both teams have been defensively. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think, given that Southend play wing backs, I think we're really interested to see how they cope with Jermaine Francis. For me, I think one of the signings of the summer. He started really well. Obviously, got a goal against Woking as well. I'm probably going to go for Southend in this one. As I say, I think it'll be a really, really close game. I think it will be the game of the game week. And I think both teams will be up there in the playoffs at the end of the season. I'm going to go over 1-0 to Southend in this one.
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I think Hartlepool going forward, albeit they have not conceding any goals, I think they're capable of scoring goals at the other side, and it could be a proper test for Southend United in this fixture. I thought they did very well, Southend, to deal with York. I don't think York particularly had really caused them any serious issues in that fixture, albeit I don't think Southend caused York defence too many issues either. But when you look at this fixture, Hartlepool have got a good attack themselves. You've mentioned Alex Reid, going forward. Jermaine Francis as well. He's a player I think everyone's got to be aware of. I think that's a real coup for Hartlepool, signing him from, I think he actually signed from Barnet, but he was on loan to Braintree, wasn't he, last season? And I think Hartlepool as a side are more of a footballing side, it feels, this season in terms of Jermaine Francis, Alex Reid, players that like to play it on the floor. Southend, good start for them overall. I think Rochdale is going to be a really difficult place for any side to go to this season. And I think there'll be few sides that are capable of getting a result. However, I do think Hartlepool are one of those sides that will be able to that are capable of getting a result at Rochdale. And I think this is one that could be a draw. It could be a narrow Southend win, like you've said. But I'm actually going to go for a draw. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw for this game overall. I think both sides will finally concede in this one. Moving on to the next fixture, Tamworth versus Brackley. I'm just going to put it out here. I was thinking of a 0-0 for Southend Hartlepool. This is definitely, for me, going to be a 0-0. Two very defensive-minded sides that I can just see cancelling each other out. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a fairly low-scoring one. Wouldn't be at all surprised if it ends 0-0. I think Tamworth will see this as the sort of game that they've got to win, really. Home game against a newly promoted team, as much as Brackley have started pretty well. I'm going to go with Tamworth. I think just 1-0 in this one. I think that they'll find a way. I think Brackley, one of those things that some of their fans have said so far is that they've looked really organised, really competitive, but just lack that quality in front of goal. And that at times they're perhaps a little bit too conservative. So I'm going to go 1-0 to Tamworth.
Moving on to the next fixture, I believe it is Yeovil versus Gateshead that we will have a look at. Gateshead, a good victory on Saturday. Really mixed team at the moment, because if you look at the defeats, they're getting defeated quite heavily. And if you just take those individual performances, those defeats so far, you'd probably look at them as a side that could slip through the net this season and go down. Then again, they managed to pull out the results against Tamworth, against Eastleigh this season. For me, I'm not sure where I'm at with Gateshead overall, because I wasn't too confident on them before a ball was kicked. And I haven't been in certain performances so far this season, yet they seem to still keep pulling it out of the bag at times with the Eastleigh win and the Tamworth win. How do you see this game going overall?
I'm going to shock a couple of Yeovil fans, really, maybe, if not all of them, because I know that they've been saying that they're struggling to score goals. I think they'll actually score 2 in this one, equal their tally for the season. But I'm going to go 2-2. I think both teams aren't as polished as they'd like to be. I'm even going to throw in an extra one there, Luke, and say that Frank Newbell will score against Yeovil.
Of course, the ex-Yeovil man as well himself. Didn't do too well at Yeovil, I don't believe, in the actual National League itself. I think he did okay in the National League North and South. Of course, at Torquay as well, wanted for a short period of time. Did quite well for you, and I think you all wanting to sign him. But no, it's a tough one to call this overall. Yeovil probably not had the best start to the season. A lot of pressures on Mark Cooper as well as a manager. I actually quite like him as a manager. I think overall, he did well at Forest Green Rovers. I thought he did okay last season as well for Yeovil, considering it was the first season in the National League. And under new ownership, potentially there's more pressure on him now. But I thought the way Yeovil recruited in the summer, I thought was pretty smart. They've been able to retain a strong defence, which wasn't an issue last season, and they've been able to bring in more firepower going forward, which is something that was clearly an area they needed to add to, and I think they've certainly done that, bringing in the likes of Tavon Campbell and Daly going forward, and Junior Moraes as well, to complement Jarvis going forward. For this one, I'm going to go for a Yeovil win, being at home. Bad result on Saturday. They'll be looking to get back to winning ways. I'm going to go for a 3-1 Yeovil win. As for Gateshead, good win against Tamworth. People know what I think of them this season compared to what I thought of them in the past. I just think away from home at Yeovil, it's a long way to go as well. I'm actually going to go for the Yeovil win. I'm going to go for a 3-1 Yeovil win. How do you see the final result going then between Woking and York City?
Yeah, funny one really, because I haven't wholly been impressed at York. They've been a little bit subpar. Obviously got that late win against Truro. Obviously got that draw against Southend. They haven't been as good as I expected them to be, albeit we are only a couple of games in. And yeah, I said it earlier, wouldn't it just be so National League that Woking, having not won a game, then go and beat York? And all the storylines write themselves, really, because Neil Ardley, he'll no doubt be really, really fired up to try and win this one against his old team, who obviously sacked him. So, yeah, part of me wants to go with Woking, but I am going to go with York, and I am going to go with York by 1 goal, 1-0. I think it will be a fairly close game. I think it'll be one of those where Neil Ardley won't care really about whether or not his team played well. It's just whether they can stay in the game, because I think he will be trying like mad to get a result in this one, to try and to obviously get the upper ground on York. So, yeah, I'm going to go with 1-0 York to win it.
Yeah, I've seen him on podcasts. I think even your guys' podcasts at NL full time since he's left York City. He didn't seem particularly happy with the way I feel he was obviously let go at York. His aim was to keep them up, which he did in the division. And I think he wanted that opportunity to be able to take them on to the next level. So, of course, his time at Woking so far, like you've mentioned here, he'll be looking to get one over on his own club, his old club at York City. I just feel York probably will have a little bit too much quality going forward, and potentially the Woking players overall low on confidence at the moment. This isn't the fixture you'd say they want, but potentially maybe it is, because, we've seen stranger things. I totally get what you're saying. I know you've gone for a York win, but you said you wouldn't be surprised if Woking pulled it out of the bag here. We've got to remember, Woking last season, the way they played was they played better against the better sides. And this is a prime example of, them being up for a game up against a really good York side, a game where they can really prove to everyone what they're about. And they're not this side this season that are going to go backwards. They're going to be able to kick on, and they've just had a poor start. That said, you look at the starting 11s from both sides, there's no excuse for York. They've got to win this game. And for that reason, I'm going to go for a 2-0 York City win overall. That more or less wraps up the predictions then. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in tonight. Joe, once again, thanks for joining me. I do really appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, Luke. Hopefully I can keep the good run going for Paul. Hopefully I can get more than 2 points this time. And it's hopefully going to be another good game week.
Brilliant. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in tonight. There's been some excellent numbers. We've had nearly 80 people tuning in live at certain points tonight, which is nearly the highest of the season so far, particularly at this stage of the season. That's great numbers. So please remember to like and subscribe. It genuinely does go a long way. I know everyone says it, but if you can do that, it will be a massive favour. So please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you're new to this as well, and you've not seen us before, we're live every single Thursday with my usual co-host Paul. We preview all the National League fixtures, and we usually try put an episode out on Sunday reviewing the fixtures or doing a live stream for the Monday or the Tuesday or the midweek fixtures as you like coming up too. So please remember to like and subscribe. Check out our sponsors, Cards Accepted. There's a link in the description for you to do that. You get 50% off your card machine, no contracts or monthly fees. Just £2.99 a month as well. If you'd like to become a channel member, you'll get early access to interviews and podcasts in the future. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in tonight. I do genuinely appreciate all your support. Joe, once again, thanks for filling in tonight. I do appreciate it too, and getting your analysts as well on the National League too. Would you like to give Off the Line blog a quick plug, sorry, while I've got you here?
Yeah, Off the Line blog on Twitter or X as it is, and try to cover all 3 national leagues, and
Brilliant. Thanks for joining me, Joe. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in tonight, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.